The views and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of KSMQ Public Service Media Incorporated or its assigns.
Veterans Day is a day to appreciate the service of the millions of men and women who have served and have served our country. Tonight we take a look at the health care concerns veterans receive. Stay tuned, you're watching Health Connections. There are over 25 million military veterans in the United States, some needing health services to help with wounds and injuries from the battlefield. Most veterans, however, come home uninjured and find themselves in need of the same health care needs as everyday civilians. What types of services are available to veterans? How do the veterans use the health care system available to them? Those questions and more tonight as we talk about military veterans. Our guest tonight is Warren Smith, a member of the VFW Post in Austin, Minnesota, and a veteran of Vietnam. Thank you for being here tonight. If you're a veteran, how do you utilize the VA system? We want to hear your stories. Call in right now. The number's there at the bottom of the screen. Before we get started, we're going to take a look at a segment from KSMQ's Coming Home program, now to gain a better understanding of some of the resources available to our military veterans.
Among the resources available to returning military personnel and their families are you and me. Community support and acceptance are paramount in providing a happy and healthy return home for our service members. Here to explore with us programs available in our region and ways that communities and individuals can be involved in the homecoming for veterans are Jean Updahl of the Freeborn County Red Cross, Andre Sanchez, Outreach Division Supervisor, Minnesota Department of Veteran Affairs, Lieutenant Colonel Barb O'Reilly, Chief, Beyond the Yellow Ribbon, Your Fort, Minnesota, and Gail Mossman, State Youth Coordinator of Beyond the Yellow Ribbon, Minnesota National Guard. Thank you all for joining me. I really appreciate your taking the time for this. Jean, we're going to start with you. And the Red Cross has served as a vital link for our families with their loved ones who are deployed. And I mean, that's been the tradition for years and years in the United States. Tell us about the services that the Red Cross provides today.
Well, the Red Cross is the link between the military personnel and their family at home. So if there's an emergency of any kind or anything that needs to be sent on to the service person, if they call the Red Cross, we can do those services for them. We also are a resource for them if they have problems or something like that. If we can't handle it, we can refer them on to a service agency that can.
So it's pretty easy for military families to have in mind that the Red Cross is a good place to go for, to be a sort of a clearinghouse for lots of other information as well.
Yes.
Okay, Andre, when should returning veterans get in touch with your office, and what types of assistance do you provide? Do you find that it's good that that they've come home? Should they right away check in with you guys?
Sure. There's actually a few different routes that they can take to contact somebody to assist them in obtaining their veterans benefits, whether it be at the county, state, or federal level. We highly encourage them to come back and meet with their county veteran service officers. There's at least one in all of our 87 counties in Minnesota in which they can go and make a direct connection with them and have their paperwork filled out and receive that advocacy to receive their veterans benefits. internally seated with the Minnesota National Guard, there's also 2 transitional advisors that can also, for active service members, refer them to the same resources. It's kind of adding an additional step because, you know, it's a friendly face within their guard units that can provide that type of, or act as that conduit to the CVSOs. Some of the services that we provide from the Minnesota Department of Veterans Affairs are, number one, federal advocacy for them to receive their benefits from the Veterans Administration. So that entails, you know, you commonly hear veterans referred to as being disabled veterans. We assist them in that process, which helps them to get entitlements to service connection or compensation due to their disabilities, and more importantly, medical treatment at all of the VA medical centers and clinics that are affiliated with the VA. There are also some state benefits that we advocate to veterans within our state. They have to be residents, of course, and honorably discharged, where they can receive some rental assistance, utilities, some medical costs, dental and optical. It's a wonderful program, and it's highly utilized. One of the other programs that we have that's pretty new as of November 2008 is called the CORE program, and that stands for Case Management, Outreach, Referral, and Education. And that program is sort of a catch-all, not just for veterans, but service members who are currently serving and their family members. And basically, we encourage them to see their county veteran service officers or somebody in our department, as we're the ones that would refer them for just a gamut of services if they need it, and Lutheran Social Services will act as the case management piece for them. Again, it's a very new program, and it's highly utilized at this point, and it's for those veterans and family members that don't just have one issue, but just have, you know, a multitude of issues that they need help with, and so it's a great program.
Lieutenant Colonel O'Reilly, you yourself have returned from deployment in Afghanistan and now are working on this Beyond the Yellow Ribbon initiative. How did you get it started, or how did it get started?
The Beyond the Yellow Ribbon program started basically from our vision of the Adjutant General of Minnesota. He's a Vietnam veteran, and so he knows how veterans should not be treated. With his vision and the passion of Chaplain John Morris, they really got the program not only going in Minnesota but nationwide. Our state legislatures wrote the law, which has become the National Defense Authorization Act, Beyond the Yellow Ribbon, which mandates a 30, 60, and 90-day reintegration training. In addition to that 30, 60, 90 training that we work on to ensure that all the service members have the benefits that Andre has spoken about, but we also want to ensure that they get reintegrated into their communities and families. It doesn't begin or end when you untie those yellow ribbons. That really is when the challenges begin for the veterans. And so we need to ensure that our Minnesota reservists, which most of us are, we're community-based, that we get reintegrated into our communities. In addition, we think that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, so we start training families about all the resources that are available about 90 days before the unit deploys. That's called our Family Preparation Academy. During the deployment, we train the families again on what is about to happen when the service member comes home, what to expect, how to communicate. We just really want a positive homecoming. We want them to be well prepared, but we also want them to know that the work is really about to begin.
Absolutely, because that homecoming is a joyous time, it's a happy time, but then you're faced with the adjustment,
right.
Hard for the returning service member as well as hard for the family.
Absolutely. I think that every single person who's involved in a deployment, and that includes the children, the spouses, the parents, the siblings, friends, the service member, they're all going to struggle with really how to get to know each other again, because life went on while the service member was gone.
Right.
And so it's definitely a challenge. It's totally normal. That's the only thing normal about reintegration, is that it is normal to have challenges. Most of us stumble through them, no problem. Others hit a brick wall and need to get some help. And that's also what we want to emphasize, is that it's really okay to ask for help. use the services.
And Gail, it's really hard for the children, right? And that's
Yes.
why the services provided by Beyond the Yellow Ribbon for the children are so critical.
Yes. Yes, there are over 14,000 children in Minnesota who have a parent serving in the Guard or Reserve. And then we know that younger brothers and sisters, sometimes a next-door neighbor child, can be affected too. And so it's important for educators, child care providers, out-of-school activity professionals to be aware that these children make a tremendous sacrifice and need special care and attention during that time.
Well, and I think that leads me to a question that I want to open to all of you. How can we as individuals or as communities, what can we do to make that homecoming happy and healthy? What are some suggestions you have?
And I would like to answer that. First of all, just by being aware that there are things that the community can do is fabulous. That's the first step. In June of last year, the governor signed a military family covenant, and all of the leadership from the different service components also signed this covenant, and that is to support the service members and their families throughout Minnesota, not just the National Guard, but all services. And through that program, or as a result of that program, we have developed the Yellow Ribbon campaign. And what that campaign does is it empowers the communities to support service members and their families. My office, we motivate the communities, we make them aware of the challenges that service members and their families have. And then we ask the communities to develop an action plan which will include all of the major groups within the city: the clergy, the educators, the law enforcement, social services, judicial.
So we all work together.
Veterans groups. We're all working together because together we can do so much more. We know that there's an outpouring of support for service members. Everybody wants to do something, but let's synchronize it and all work together. When the communities do this, they're not just building a program that can support the military. They're really building a strong community that's able to respond to any group in need. And that's really the governor's, I think, intent as we're building the Yellow Ribbon community. Let's support each other and work together. It's about caring.
Well, the state of Minnesota is really fortunate to have this program and also to have all of you great people working on behalf of the men and women who are serving our country and with working with their families. So I really applaud you, and I thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us.
Beyond the Yellow Ribbon itself is a term, but we need to make sure it's more than just a term. It needs to be a meaningful, deliverable set of services that reflects the best commitment that we can make as a state and as a nation to the men and women who risk their lives and take on great burdens for the cause of freedom and liberty and security for this country. We can never repay the full amount that we should, but we need to do all that we can. And this is one step in that direction. It's a fantastic program, and I hope people will continue to support it enthusiastically, and I believe they will.
Yes. Warren, what were some of the immediate challenges you faced when you returned from Vietnam?
When we came back from Vietnam, which was in 1968,
what were some of the immediate challenges you faced when you came back home from Vietnam, particularly with regard to health care or medical issues?
when we got out of the military, most of us had spent 6 months on stateside before we got out, so we did have our health care pretty much taken care of. And we were also young, too, 20 years of age, and most of us that were not wounded did not have any health care problems. We had been promised that we would have free health care for the rest of our life. But I think after we got out of the military back then, most of us just kind of receded to a corner because nobody wanted to hear about the war or what we'd been through or anything. And so we just got busy with work and really didn't bother with the VA. We were all quite healthy and young at that point. So we just didn't do anything with the Veterans Administration for probably 20 years, I would say. Then after that, we kind of came back to the VA with a few health problems. We'd start with one thing and would have really good help with that, and so it got to be a little more. Now the only problem was they were charging for everything back then. If you were working or making income, it went according to your income, and you had to pay for the Veterans Administration health care at that point, until if you did receive a disability from injuries suffered from when you were in the military service. Then at that point, then it was free from then on.
How do you see the shift, psychological shift or philosophical shift from where we were in Vietnam as to where we are now in the Afghan and Iraqi campaign?
There's such a huge difference. Back then in '68, or when we came back from Vietnam, you never even dared even mention that you were in Vietnam. Nobody cared at that point. But now today, people are welcoming veterans home. They're thanking them. They're treated very well. I don't know why the difference. I just don't quite understand why it didn't happen back then. And they're well respected now, which they should be.
It seems like there's I used to be in the military, and there was a real stigma against getting any mental health services or any type of health care. You were looked at as weak or something, or you might lose your security clearance or something. And I think that maybe there's a shift from the top, that the leadership is doing a pretty good job of stating that, you have to, you are allowed to get help, and it doesn't need to affect your security clearance and things like that.
I think a lot of it is back in the 60s. I don't believe that post-traumatic stress was even discovered back then, or that they even knew about it. I think they called it shell shock back then. And when you're 20 years of age and you come back from war, and you do not want that on your record, that you've got post-traumatic stress disorder, or that you have problems of that nature. So nobody, at least nobody from my unit, ever went in for many, many years. Probably the first person that even went in was 8 years ago. And this has been 42 years for all of us, too. But it's accepted now, post-traumatic stress.
What welcomed you back to the community, or what do you think that would help our veterans that are returning now? Is there anything that you can think of that somebody did for you, or that we could currently do right now to help our veterans or the veterans' families while they're deployed and redeployed? Anything?
Well, I think, there's a lot of things you can do for the family to help them out while the veteran is overseas or deployed. But probably the biggest thing would be when they come back is to thank them, to just walk up to them and shake their hand and thank them for their service. That means an awful lot to any veteran who's gone through that.
Yeah, that's huge. In fact, I talked to a colleague of mine who I used to be stationed with, and that's the exact same thing he said, was that, boy, a little thanks goes a long ways, and they really appreciate it. And he also reminded me to remember our fallen comrades. It's so easy to think about troops right now, but, not only think about the fallen folks, but also the older veterans, because right now our soldiers seem to be getting some pretty good services. but the ones from Vietnam, and even some of the ones that are still around from World War II and the Korean War, you know, we're kind of forgetting about them. And there are many, many homeless people. And I was researching before we talked tonight, and they're 3 times more likely to be homeless if they're a veteran than not. And that's alarming to me, that so many of our veterans have fallen through the cracks.
I did experience that when I did find some of my combat buddies from my unit. One of them was a homeless veteran for a while too. It kind of surprised me, but then yeah, I suppose it's very common.
Mm-hmm. And you know, another area we don't think about so much, but many of our soldiers are female, you know, and
True.
They have their own challenges coming back. And were women, was it the Women's Army Corps when you were in, and that?
You know, I don't remember too many women back then. There just wasn't, out in the field, we didn't encounter any women in the military back then. But there must have been for the Army nurses and that sort of thing, too. Mm-hmm. So I know there are a lot of veterans that are women, more so now than what there were back in the 60s.
Mm-hmm. And you know, veterans have their own unique type of challenges, mental health and health challenges, as opposed to, say, civilian health challenges. You know, we have so many more head injuries and loss of limb, and just even that whole reintegration back into the community, you know, that civilians don't experience. Would you comment on any of those topics?
Well, I think the ones that were wounded that did have that type of trauma, when they got out, they probably spent a lot of time at the VA getting help. But for the ones that weren't wounded or were healthy when they got out, they kind of just did not go to the VA. But I've found the Veterans Administration, as far as health services, have been just excellent.
Oh, good.
And we are 100 miles away from the VA hospital, although there is a clinic in Rochester. At least they will even pay us, or they will have vans to take us to there now. But I do almost, well, I'd say 100% of my health is done through the VA.
Oh, really? And
it's very good. I've had a very good experience up there. The only problem that we're encountering this year
Here we go.
is just we used to be able to set up an appointment a year ahead of time, which was really great, especially when if you're working. You knew exactly when you were going up there for a physical or something.
Right.
But now within the last 2 years they've changed it, and you cannot set up an appointment more than 6 months ahead of time.
Oh.
Which is a little more inconvenient than what it used to be.
Right. Well, you know, I think they've come a long way. Secretaries Gates and the other, I can't remember his name right now, but I think they're making some good changes. I know the president just proposed to spend $25 billion, and that's with a B, dollars for veterans, increased Veterans Administration benefits. So I think we're heading in the right direction.
Definitely.
Yeah. I was wondering if you wanted to share anything else about coming home and something that touched your heart, or something someone said to you that really resonated with you and made your experience overseas seem worth it. Or
I think it's been more in recent years now. Since I've retired a couple of years ago, and I've joined the VFW Color Guard, and I've probably been thanked many more times in the last 2 years than I have in 42 years. And it does make you feel like it was all worthwhile now. Thanks really goes a long ways. I think another thing for the public to do is to support veterans when they have Memorial Day, when they have Veterans Day like today. Today is a very important day for veterans because it's not only celebrating the veterans that have gone in the past, but it's the veterans that are here today too.
Let's talk more about your experiences with the VFW. What's it meant to you?
Well, I joined the Color Guard because I felt that I needed to give back to society. When I retired, it was time, it was my turn. And so we do quite a few funerals, probably 25, 30 funerals a year. And it does make you feel good, like you're helping out the veterans that have died then.
Sure. Well, good. Thank you for watching this episode of Health Connections. Good night.
We can never repay the full amount that we should, but we need to do all that we can. And this is one step in that direction. It's a fantastic program, and I hope people will continue to support it enthusiastically, and I believe they will.